The notification popped up on my phone during dessert, right as Aunt Eleanor was cutting into her famous triple chocolate cake. "Your DNA results are ready," it said, with a cheerful little icon that had no idea. It was about to destroy my entire family. I almost ignored it. After all, we were in the middle of our annual 4th of July reunion, and Grandma Rose had just started her traditional toast about family bonds and bloodlines. But something made me click on it anyway. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was fate. Or maybe it was just my lifelong habit of checking every notification immediately. What I saw made the fork slip from my hand, clattering onto my plate with a sound that seemed to echo through the suddenly silent dining room. My name is Meredith, though everyone calls me Mary. I'm 28 years old, and until that moment, I thought I knew exactly who I was. Daughter of Patricia and Thomas Hartwell. Niece to Eleanor and Frank, granddaughter to Sweet Rose Hartwell, the matriarch who held our family together with iron determination disguised as gentle smiles. I'd taken the DNA test on a whim 3 weeks earlier. My coworker had been raving about finding her Irish roots, and there was a sale, so why not? I'd expected to find out I was boring. Maybe 70% English, 20% German, 10% random European mutt. Something to laugh about over wine with friends. I never expected to find out I wasn't a Hartwell at all. The results stared back at me from my phone screen. 0% relation to Thomas Hartwell, 0% relation to Eleanor Hartwell Morrison, 0% relation to Franklin Hartwell. But that wasn't even the worst part. My hands were shaking as I scrolled down to the DNA relatives section. There was one close match, someone listed as parent-child relationship. The name made my blood run cold. Derek Morrison, my cousin Derek, Eleanor's son, except according to this test, he wasn't my cousin at all. He was my half-brother. I looked up from my phone to find Derek across the table, laughing at something Uncle Frank had said. He had the same dark hair I did, the same green eyes that everyone said I'd inherited from the Hartwell side, except I hadn't inherited them from the Hartwell side at all. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. If Derek was my half-brother, that meant we shared a parent. It couldn't be my mother. She and Eleanor were sisters-in-law, not blood relatives. Which meant I turned to look at my father. Thomas Hartwell, the man who'd taught me to ride a bike, who'd walked me down the aisle at my wedding, who'd held my hand when I divorced 2 years later. The man who apparently wasn't my father at all. But if he wasn't my father, and Derek was my half-brother through Eleanor's side, the chocolate cake in my stomach turned to lid as the terrible truth began to crystallize. Eleanor's husband, my Uncle Frank, sitting right there at the head of the table, carving the turkey with the same hands that had taught me to play catch when I was 7. My mother must have, with her sister-in-law's husband, and I was the result. I needed air. I stood up so abruptly that my chair scraped against the floor, drawing everyone's attention. "Mary, honey, are you all right?" My mother's voice seemed to come from very far away. Patricia Hartwell, the woman who'd preached honesty and integrity my entire life, who'd grounded me for a week when I was 12 for lying about breaking her favorite vase. I couldn't look at her. I couldn't look at any of them. The room was spinning, and I could feel 30 pairs of eyes on me. Cousins, aunts, uncles, all the extended family gathered for our perfect annual reunion. I need some air," I managed to say, already moving toward the door. But my grandmother's voice stopped me cold. "Meredith Ann Hartwell, sit down." There was steel in that voice, the kind that had made grown men quake in boardrooms for decades before her retirement. I turned slowly to face her, and what I saw in her eyes made my knees weak. She knew. Somehow, Grandma Rose knew exactly what I just discovered. "Grandma?" My voice came out as barely a whisper. She set down her wine glass with deliberate precision. "I said sit down, all of you." The command in her voice was absolute. Even Uncle Frank, who usually treated family gatherings like casual suggestions, slowly lowered himself back into his chair. "Rose, "What's going on?" Aunt Eleanor asked, but there was something in her voice too. A tremor of fear, maybe, or guilt. Grandma Rose stood up, all 5 feet 2 inches of her radiating an authority that made her seem 7 feet tall. "I had hoped to take this secret to my grave," she said, her voice steady despite the bomb she was about to drop. "But it seems modern technology has other plans." My phone was still clutched in my hand, the DNA results glowing accusingly. Somehow I found my voice. "Grandma, did you know that Dad isn't?" "Thomas is your father in every way that matters," she said sharply. "He raised you. He loved you. He's not my biological father." The words exploded out of me. "And Uncle Frank? Uncle Frank is..." The silence that followed was deafening. I watched the color drain from my mother's face, watched Aunt Eleanor's hand fly to her mouth, watched Uncle Frank close his eyes like a man facing execution. But it was my dad's reaction that broke my heart. Thomas Hartwell, the strongest man I knew, seemed to shrink before my eyes. "You know?" he asked quietly. "How do you know?" I held up my phone weakly. "DNA test. I wanted to know about our ancestry." "Oh, Mary." My mother's voice was broken, tears already streaming down her face. "We were going to tell you. We were always going to tell you, but then the years passed. And it never seemed like the right time, and..." 28 years, Mom. I was on my feet again, rage replacing shock. "You had 28 years to tell me the truth." "It's not that simple," Uncle Frank said, finally finding his voice. He looked older suddenly, the weight of decades of lies etched into every line on his face. "Not that simple," I laughed, but it was a harsh, bitter sound. "You slept with your brother's wife. You fathered a child with your brother's wife. How much more simple could it be?" "Meredith," Eleanor's voice was sharp, "you don't understand." "Oh, I understand perfectly," I shot back. "You all lied to me. Every single one of you, every birthday, every Christmas, every family gathering where we talked about family resemblances and inherited traits and..." I broke off, another horrible realization hitting me. "Derek." Oh God, Derek doesn't know either, does he? My half-brother, and the word made me want to vomit, was staring at all of us with growing horror. "What are you talking about? Mary, what's going on?" "We're siblings," I said flatly. "Half-siblings. Your dad is my dad too." The sound Derek made was inhuman, something between a gasp and a moan. He pushed back from the table, stumbling toward the bathroom. We could all hear him retching. "Now look what you've done," Eleanor snapped at me, as if this was somehow my fault. "What I've done?" I was beyond incredulous. "Are you seriously blaming me for this?" "Enough!" Grandma Rose's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "Everyone sit down and shut up. If we're doing this, we're doing it properly." Slowly, reluctantly, we all returned to our seats. Derek came back from the bathroom, his face gray, and collapsed into his chair. The festive 4th of July decorations seemed to mock us, red, white, and blue streamers hanging over a family in ruins. "It happened 30 years ago," Grandma Rose began, her voice taking on the cadence of someone telling a very old story. "Patricia and Thomas had been trying for a baby for 3 years. The doctors said it was unlikely to happen naturally." I looked at my parents, or the people I'd called my parents. My mother was sobbing silently while my father stared at his hands. "Frank and Eleanor had just had Derek," Grandma continued. "They came to visit for Christmas, and there was a party. Too much wine. Thomas was working late, trying to make money for fertility treatments. Patricia was vulnerable, desperate for a child. Frank was weak." "It was one time," Frank said hoarsely. "One terrible, stupid mistake." One time was all it took, Grandma Rose said coldly. Patricia discovered she was pregnant 6 weeks later. The timing was close enough that Thomas believed the treatments had finally worked. You knew it wasn't his baby? I asked my mother, my voice hollow. She nodded, unable to speak through her tears. When did Dad find out? I had to know. When did you find out? I asked Thomas directly. He finally looked up at me, and the pain in his eyes was unbearable. When you were 2, you got sick, needed a blood transfusion. They tested all of us for compatibility, and he trailed off, shaking his head. The doctor pulled me aside, told me it was impossible for you to be my biological child. But you stayed, I said, not quite a question. Of course I stayed. For the first time, there was strength in his voice again. You were my daughter. You called me Daddy. You ran to me when you were scared. Biology didn't change that. But you never told me. We made a pact, Grandma Rose interjected. All of us who knew, Patricia, Thomas, Frank, Eleanor, and myself, we agreed that the children would never know. It would only hurt you and Derek, and for what? The mistake had been made. The families had been formed. We thought it was kinder. Kinder? Derek finally spoke, his voice raw. You thought lying to us our entire lives was kinder? Yes, Eleanor said defiantly. You and Mary grew up as cousins. You had normal lives, normal relationships. If you'd known you were siblings, we had a right to know. I slammed my hand on the table, making the dishes jump. Medical history, if nothing else. What if we'd, I couldn't even finish the thought. Derek and I had never been close, but we dated siblings from another family in high school. The thought of how differently that could have gone made me nauseous. We were careful, Grandma Rose said. We made sure you were never interested in each other romantically. Encouraged different schools, different social circles. You manipulated our entire lives, Derek said, understanding dawning in his eyes. That's why you threw a fit when I wanted to go to state like Mary. That's why you always made sure we were never single at the same time. The full scope of their deception was staggering. Every family gathering, every photo, every story about family traits and genetics. All of it built on a foundation of lies. There's more, Grandma Rose said quietly, and the room somehow got even more tense. More? I laughed hysterically. What could possibly be worse than this? She looked directly at Frank. Tell them about Marcus. Frank went white as a sheet. Eleanor made a sound like a wounded animal. Who's Marcus? Derek demanded. Marcus Tanner, Grandma Rose said when Frank remained silent. He died in a car accident 31 years ago. He was Eleanor's boyfriend before she married Frank. Grandma, no, Eleanor whispered. But Rose was relentless. Derek, I think it's time you took a DNA test too. The implication hung in the air like a noose. Derek looked between his parents, or the people he'd called his parents, with growing horror. No, he said. No, you're not saying. We don't know for sure, Frank said desperately. Eleanor and I were together by then. We were engaged. But Marcus was still coming around, Grandma finished. Wasn't he, Eleanor? My aunt, God, was she even my aunt anymore? Broke down completely. It was ending, I was ending it. But he wouldn't accept it, and there was one last time just before the wedding. Stop! Derek was on his feet, backing away from the table. Just stop! But Pandora's box was open now, and the secrets kept spilling out like poison. Is anyone in this family actually related to who they think they are? I asked, hysteria creeping into my voice. This is exactly why we never told you, Thomas said quietly. Look what's happening. Our family is being destroyed. Our family was built on lies, I shot back. It was always going to be destroyed. You just delayed the inevitable. And what would you have had us do? Patricia finally found her voice, fierce despite her tears. Should I have had an abortion? Should we have torn apart two families when you were a baby? Should we have traumatized two innocent children with the truth? You should have been honest. But even as I said it, I wasn't sure anymore. Would I have wanted to know at 5, at 10, at 15? When was the right time to tell someone their entire identity was a lie? We need those DNA tests, Grandma Rose said firmly. All of us. We need to know exactly who is related to whom. Why? Eleanor demanded. So you can judge us more? So you can catalog every mistake, every lie? So there are no more secrets, Rose replied. So the next generation doesn't have to go through this. The next generation. I thought of my cousins. Were they really my cousins? Playing outside, blissfully unaware that their family was imploding in the dining room. I can't do this, Derek said. I can't sit here and pretend everything's fine while you all calmly discuss how you've lied to us forever. He looked at me, and for the first time in our lives, I saw my own features reflected back at me. How had I never noticed? Mary, I'm sorry. This isn't... I know, I said quietly. It's not your fault. He left then, the screen door slamming behind him. Through the window, I could see him getting into his car, driving away from this nightmare. Anyone else want to confess? I asked bitterly. Any other secret children? Hidden murders? Maybe someone's in witness protection? Meredith, please. My mother, and despite everything, she was still my mother, reached for me. I jerked away. Don't touch me, I can't. The room was closing in. All these faces I'd known my entire life, now strange and foreign. Who were these people? Who was I? I need to leave, I said. Mary, sweetheart, let's talk about this, Thomas said. You're upset, we all are, but we're still family. Are we? I asked. Because from where I'm standing, I don't know what we are anymore. I grabbed my purse, my phone still clutched in my hand with those damning results. As I reached the door, Grandma Rose called out one more time. Meredith. I turned back to look at her, this woman who'd held our family together through sheer force of will and a web of lies. There's one more thing, she said. Of course there is. I was beyond surprise now, beyond hurt. I was numb. Your grandfather didn't die of a heart attack. The words hit like a physical blow. Even my parents looked shocked. This was news to them too. Mother, what are you saying? Thomas asked. Rose lifted her chin, every inch the formidable woman who'd built a business empire from nothing. He found out about Patricia and Frank. The shock triggered a stroke. He lived for 3 more days, just long enough to make me promise that the children would never know. She looked directly at me. He loved you so much, Meredith. His last words were about protecting you and Derek from this pain. That broke something in me. My grandfather, the man who taught me chess and taken me fishing, who'd called me his little warrior princess. He died keeping this secret. Died because of this secret. I hope it was worth it, I said, my voice empty of everything but exhaustion. I hope the lie was worth all of this. I left then, driving away from my childhood home, from the family I thought I knew, from the life that had been built on a foundation of deception. My phone kept buzzing, calls and texts from various family members, but I ignored them all. Hours later, I found myself at a hotel 3 towns over, staring at the DNA results that had changed everything. There were other matches on there, distant cousins and second cousins twice removed, people I'd never met, who knew nothing about our family drama. Maybe that was for the best. Maybe the real Hartwell legacy wasn't blood or genes or shared DNA. Maybe it was just secrets and lies, passed down from generation to generation like a poisoned inheritance. I thought about Derek, my brother who'd grown up as my cousin. About Thomas, my father who wasn't my father but who'd loved me anyway. About Patricia and Frank, and their one terrible mistake that had created me. About Eleanor and her own secrets. About Grandma Rose, the keeper of all our sins. And I thought about my grandfather, dying with the truth locked behind his lips, choosing the lie to protect us. Had he been right? Would I have been happier, never knowing? The hotel room was quiet, except for the hum of the air conditioner. Somewhere outside, fireworks were going off. Other families celebrating the 4th of July, blissfully unaware that their own foundations might be just as fragile as ours. I picked up my phone and scrolled through the messages. Apologies, explanations, pleas to come back and talk. Derek had sent just one. I don't blame you. Call me when you're ready. My brother. The word still felt foreign, wrong. We'd played together as children, competed in family game nights, shared embarrassing teenage stories. All while our parents watched and knew the truth and said nothing. There was a knock at my door. I ignored it, but it came again, more insistent. Mary, it's me. Thomas, Dad, the man who'd raised me despite knowing I was the product of his wife's betrayal. I opened the door to find him standing there, looking older than I'd ever seen him. How did you find me? You've been using my credit card since you were 16, he said with a sad smile. The hotel charge showed up on my phone. Despite everything, that made me laugh. A short, broken sound, but still a laugh. You came alone. I thought you might need space from the others, but I also thought you shouldn't be alone. He hesitated. May I come in? I stepped aside, and he entered the small room, looking as out of place as I felt. I'm sorry, he said simply. Not for loving you, not for raising you, but for the lie. You deserved better. Did I? I sat on the bed, suddenly exhausted. Would knowing earlier have made anything better? I don't know, he admitted. I've asked myself that question every day for 26 years. Every birthday, every Father's Day, every time you called me Dad. I wondered if I was being selfish. Were you? He considered that carefully. Maybe. But Mary, you have to understand. When I found out you were 2 years old, you were already my daughter in every way that mattered. The biology. It was just science. It didn't change how I felt when you took your first steps toward me, or when you said Daddy for the first time. But you stayed with Mom after what she did. It wasn't simple, he said. Nothing about it was simple. I was angry, yes, hurt beyond words. But I also understood. We'd been trying for so long, and the fertility issues were mine. Your mother was desperate for a child. And Frank. Frank was there with everything I couldn't give her. That doesn't make it right. No, he agreed. It doesn't, but it makes it human. And in the end, I got you. However it happened, whatever mistakes were made, I got to be your father. That's not something I could ever regret. We sat in silence for a while, the weight of 28 years of deception between us. What happens now? I asked finally. I don't know, he said honestly. I suppose that's up to you. And Derek, the rest of us, will have to live with the consequences of our choices. Grandma thinks everyone should get DNA tests. Make sure there are no more secrets. He sighed. Your grandmother likes to control things. It's how she's always coped. But maybe she's right. Maybe it's time to drag everything into the light. Even about Grandpa? His face tightened. Especially about Grandpa. I had no idea. If I'd known the stress caused his stroke. Would you have done anything differently? He was quiet for a long moment. I'd like to say yes, But honestly, I probably would have done exactly the same thing. Kept the secret, protected you, tried to hold the family together. We all thought we were doing the right thing. The road to hell, I murmured, is paved with good intentions, he finished. Yes, though I prefer to think of it as the road to family reunions. That surprised another laugh out of me. Dark humor, Dad. If we can't laugh, all we can do is cry, he said, and I think we've all done enough of that for one day. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Grandma Rose. Family meeting tomorrow, 10 a.m. We'll do this properly. I showed it to Thomas. He shook his head. Your grandmother and her meetings, as if this is a business merger gone wrong. Maybe that's the only way she knows how to handle it, I said. Like a crisis management situation. Are you going to go? I thought about it. Part of me wanted to run, to leave town and never look back. Start fresh somewhere where DNA tests and family secrets couldn't follow. But another part, the part that had inherited Grandma Rose's steel spine, whether by blood or just example, knew I'd never be able to live with the unanswered questions. Yeah, I said finally. I'll go. Good, Thomas said. Whatever happens, we'll face it together, as a family. Even if we don't know who's actually family anymore? Especially then, he said firmly. Family isn't just about blood, Mary. It's about choice. And I chose you 28 years ago. I choose you now. That's not going to change, no matter what any test says. We talked for a while longer, about memories and mistakes, about the future and forgiveness. When he finally left, I felt wrung out, but somehow steadier. The foundation of my life had crumbled, but maybe something could be built on the ruins. I picked up my phone and scrolled to Derek's message. After a long moment, I typed back, "Tomorrow at Grandma's. We'll figure this out together." His response came quickly. Together. I like the sound of that, sis. Sister's such a simple word, but it changed everything. We weren't cousins anymore. We were siblings, bound by DNA and deception and a shared sense of betrayal. But maybe eventually we could be bound by something more. By choice, like Thomas had said. The fireworks outside were reaching their grand finale. Explosions of light and sound celebrating independence. I wondered if that's what this was. Our own messy, painful independence from the lies that had shaped us. Tomorrow would bring more revelations, more tears, more recriminations. The family meeting would be brutal, but it would also be honest. Maybe for the first time in 3 decades. I closed my eyes and tried to sleep, but my mind kept circling back to that moment at dinner when the notification had appeared. Such a small thing, a cheerful little alert on my phone. I'd expected to find out I was boring. Instead, I'd found out I was a lie. But maybe that wasn't quite right. Maybe I wasn't a lie. Maybe I was just the truth that everyone had been too afraid to tell. And now that it was out, now that the secrets were spilling like blood from an old wound, maybe we could finally start to heal. Or maybe we'd just bleed out together, a family destroyed by the very lies meant to protect it. Either way, at least we'd know who we really were. The hotel room felt like a cocoon, separate from the chaos I'd left behind. But I couldn't stay here forever. Tomorrow I'd have to face them all again. Patricia, who wasn't just my mother but my betrayer. Frank, who was my father but never my dad. Eleanor, who was my stepmother in all but name. And Derek, who was my brother, despite a lifetime of being told otherwise. And Grandma Rose, the puppet master who'd orchestrated this elaborate deception for 3 decades. I thought about the DNA test that had started it all. Such a simple thing, advertised on TV with smiling families discovering their heritage. Find out who you really are, the ads promised. Well, I'd found out I was Meredith Hartwell, daughter of a lie, raised on secrets, born from betrayal. I was the breaking point of a family held together by nothing more than shared deception and stubborn will. But I was also Meredith Hartwell, loved by a man who wasn't my father, but chose to be my dad, protected by a grandfather who died keeping my secret, part of a messy, complicated, impossibly broken family that had, in its own twisted way, tried to shield me from pain. They'd failed, of course. The pain had just been deferred, compound interest on a 30-year-old debt of dishonesty. But as I finally drifted off to sleep, one thought kept circling through my mind. Despite everything, despite the lies and betrayal and earth-shattering revelations, these people were still my family. Broken, built on deception, held together by secrets, but family nonetheless. Tomorrow, we'd either find a way to rebuild on honest ground, or we'd finally collapse under the weight of our lies. Either way, at least I'd know the truth. All of it.